Open to Debate, I'm John Donvan, and we are gathered for something remarkable here. A meeting between two men who disagree fiercely across an issue that has fiercely divided so many of us within families and on college campuses. And for that alone, for their courage in coming to the same stage, let us congratulate them at the outset, because we know how rare it is in our currently hyper-polarized culture for opposing viewpoints to be heard, spoken aloud, and in competition with each other under the same roof. But that is the essence of debate, and that is the value that we promote at Open to Debate. And so it is an honor to be here at New York's venerable Adler Hall, a crown jewel of the New York Society for Ethical Culture, where we cannot and we will not forget how the war in Gaza is steeped in pain and outrage and fear and anger. It's why this debate matters, and it's why it is natural to take sides, even necessary to take sides. But listening to the other side, which these debaters will be called to do with one another, and which I hope you will do as members of the audience just by being here, that may be a first step, at least in understanding how and why and exactly why we disagree. The question we have framed for this purpose, and that we will hear debated tonight, is this: were Israel's actions in the war in Gaza justified? So let's meet our debaters. I'm going to come back to the center. And again, as they enter the stage, I appreciate applause for each of them. Let's meet our debaters. Answering yes to the question, were Israel's actions in the Gaza war justified, I want to welcome Eylon Levy. Thank you. Eylon, you are the, if you can stay with me here, you're the former spokesperson for Israel in the October 7th War, co-founder of the Israeli Citizen Spokesperson's Office, host of the State of a Nation podcast. Welcome to Open to Debate. And here to argue no to the question, were Israel's actions in the Gaza war justified, I want to welcome Mehdi Hassan. Mehdi, you are founder, editor-in-chief, and CEO of Zeteo, host of Al Jazeera's Head to Head, an award-winning journalist. Welcome to Open to Debate.
Thank you for having me.
And gentlemen, thanks each of you for being here tonight. Let's start it with a handshake, and then we can begin the debate.
Glad to take this offline.
Thank you.
So let's get to our opening statements. We want each of you to take a few minutes to explain why you're answering yes or no to our question, were Israel's actions in the Gaza war justified? And when I say were, I just want to be clear, we chose that word to talk about Israel's immediate actions after what happened on October 7th up through today. It's everything. It's not this moment, it's not that moment, it's the course of things. Eylon, you are up first. Your answer to the question is yes. The floor is yours. Please tell us why.
On October 7th, Hamas perpetrated an act of genocide against the people of Israel. Its death squads invaded with a clear mission: to massacre as many people as they could, as sadistically as they could, and to take survivors as hostages. Hamas had a strategy: to lure Israel into an urban war and generate enough suffering that the world would pressure Israel to leave Hamas alone to do it again and again. Hamas slaughtered 1,200 people on that day at a music festival and in their beds. They cremated little children alive. They perpetrated barbaric acts of sexual violence. They beheaded, tortured, and mutilated their victims alive and dead, and they did it with glee. And then they took over 250 hostages, including little children, paraded them through the streets of Gaza, to jeering crowds, hid them in tunnels and homes where they are being starved and tortured and raped and executed. It was the deadliest terror attack in world history after 9/11, the bloodiest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, and the opening shot of the Iranian regime's regional war against Israel on 7 fronts. At this point, Israel faced a choice, as Hamas immediately threatened to do it again and again until Israel was destroyed. To do nothing, or to do something. Both would have consequences. Doing nothing meant letting Hamas get away with October 7th, leave it free to do it again and again, only this time with thousands of dangerous terrorists released from jail and with its popularity skyrocketing. That's not an option. Doing something meant targeting Hamas's terrorists in accordance with international law in order to dismantle their ability to wage war and live out that threat to do it again and again. That was the choice that Israel faced after October 7th. Now, after October 7th, that campaign to bring Hamas down and bring the hostages home was the only moral response. Hamas exists for the sake of war, and for the sake of peace, it must go. Let me explain Israel's strategy. Israel's strategy is to get civilians out of harm's way so that it can target Hamas's terrorist infrastructure under their feet. Hamas's strategy is to keep civilians in harm's way so that it can use them to shield their military infrastructure. Israel left Gaza in 2005 and never wanted to go back, but Hamas seized power 2 years later, started firing rockets at our cities, and rigged Gaza's urban landscape for war. They dug a network of military tunnels 1.5 times longer than New York subway under homes and schools and hospitals. They booby-trapped tens of thousands of buildings. They started firing rockets at our homes and our towns from inside their schools and their hospitals. In response, Israel's actions are to target Hamas's terrorists and to take unprecedented efforts to keep their civilians safe from their own leader's sick strategy to sacrifice them on the altar of jihad. That's why it keeps repeatedly urging them to get out of harm's way from Hamas strongholds and flooding the area with over 1 million tons of aid, because it keeps saying this is a war against Hamas, not the people of Gaza. Now, the suffering of my neighbors in Gaza is horrific. I blame their psychopath leaders for launching this war, fighting it inside civilian areas and refusing to release the hostages and surrender. Now, tonight's debate is about whether Israel's actions in the war in Gaza are justified, in a context in which I hope we can all agree none of the enemy's actions are justified. Because we are fighting a jihadist army that has as much respect for humanity and law as Mehdi Hassan has for the truth. Mehdi may say, I condemn Hamas's acts on October 7th, but he will not condemn its strategy, because he is part of its strategy. Hamas is counting on its defense attorney to shield it from the consequences of the war that it started and deflect blame onto Israel so it can do October 7th again, maybe because they share a goal that Israel shouldn't exist. Mehdi Hassan will say tonight that October 7th does not justify Israel's actions in this horrible war. My question then is this.
Eylon, I'm sorry, your time is up.
What does October 7th?
I'm sorry, your time is up. Thank you. Mehdi? Eylon, in already calling your opponent a liar, you have already crossed one of the lines of the culture that we try to establish here. I wish you hadn't.
I don't mind. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. I can do that.
You don't need to do that to make your case. Please. Mehdi Hassan, you are answering no in answer to the question, were Israel's actions in the Gaza war justified?
All right, so, ladies and gentlemen, the question, were they justified? Were the actions justified?
And it would be great if you didn't feel the need to respond to the personal attack, because it'll waste time.
We'll decide when we get there, John. Were they justified? No, obviously not. Of course not. October the 7th, I think we can all agree, was a crime, a war crime, right? We can all agree on that. And taking hostages is a war crime. And those hostages should be released. But to destroy an entire place, an entire people in response is never justified. Never justified. How are we still I don't understand how we're debating this more than 40,000 deaths later. I don't understand how we're still debating this sitting in the comfort of New York, 7,000 miles away from a place that the UN Secretary General has called hell on earth. Justified? Justified? Was Israel justified in carrying out one of the most intense civilian punishment campaigns in history, according to Dr. Robert Pape at the University of Chicago, dropping 500-pound bombs, 1,000-pound bombs, 2,000-pound bombs on schools, hospitals, universities, bookstores, libraries, mosques, churches, refugee camps, apartment buildings, cemeteries, destroying a higher percentage of buildings in northern Gaza than the Allies destroyed in Dresden during World War II, reducing Gaza to 42 million tons of rubble while they got people out of the way? How is that justified? Dropping a bomb, for example, on a 6-story apartment building in central Gaza last October, killing more than 100 people inside, including more than 50 children, with no Hamas target in sight, according to Human Rights Watch, with no explanation offered by the Israeli military. Even till today, was that justified, Eylon? Was Israel justified in telling people to go to safe zones and then bombing them and killing them in those safe zones? According to NBC, there were 7 deadly airstrikes between January and April in areas that the Israeli military had specifically designated as safe zones, killing Palestinian civilians like Sabrine Sakani, who was 30 weeks pregnant at the time. She was killed in a safe zone in April. Her little baby, newborn baby, died less than a week later. Was that justified too, Eylon? Was Israel justified in killing a record number of kids in Gaza, 16,000 children, turning Gaza into what the UN has called a graveyard for children, according to Save the Children, killing more kids in the first 3 weeks that were killed globally in each of the past 4 years, killing little kids like 6-year-old Hind Rajab and her 15-year-old sister Layan, firing 335 bullets into the car they were in. 335 bullets. And then killing the 2 paramedics who went to try and rescue them. Was that justified too, Eylon? Was Israel justified in killing a record number of aid workers in Gaza? Right? A record number. Targeting again and again, systematically, car by car, according to Chef Jose Andres. A specifically, explicitly marked World Central Kitchen aid convoy killing 7 aid workers in the process. Was that justified? Was Israel justified in starving the people of Gaza, using food and water as a weapon of war, to quote both the EU and Oxfam? Was Israel justified in blocking aid trucks from going into Gaza simply because they carry things like crutches, nail clippers, and even chocolate croissants, according to the Washington Post? Was Israel justified in raping, sodomizing Palestinian detainees who were charged with no crimes whatsoever? Putting hot rods up their rectums, amputating their limbs, according to CNN and the New York Times. Was that rape and torture justified, Eylon? Israel, according to the ICC chief prosecutor, who put out a statement calling for the arrest of Eylon's former boss, Benjamin Netanyahu, said that Israel may have military goals, legitimate goals, but the way they're carried out, killing innocent people, starving people, is criminal, he said. Criminal, think about that. Eylon Levy is a former spokesperson for a man who the ICC chief prosecutor once arrested for war crimes. Eylon himself has produced a number of lies, sorry John, in service of those war crimes. He has a bunch of tweets still up tonight which say that babies were beheaded on October the 7th, babies were baked in ovens, babies were ripped from their mother's wombs. October 7th was bad enough, but Eylon had to exaggerate it for atrocity purposes. Those tweets are still up. Why would you trust anything this man says to you tonight? Look, he's here to gaslight you, to defend the indefensible, to excuse the inexcusable, to justify the unjustifiable, but you don't need to. Tonight you can choose to be on the side not of cruelty, not of criminality, but on the side of the innocent people of Gaza who are being killed as we speak tonight, as we speak, by Eylon's former colleagues in the Israeli military on the orders of Eylon's former bosses in the Israeli government. So yes, I choose to oppose this horrific and homicidal motion. Thank you.
So we're going to have a discussion with that's a little bit looser in format. But the first thing I want to say to each of you is, this mutual urination contest is not helping us understand the principles involved. All right? You think he tells untruths, you think he tells untruths. You don't need to keep hitting that point, I hope, to make your argument. And again, it's not what we're about.